Are you happy in your business? Now, I have had my share of emotional ups and downs in my 20 years of being a solo entrepreneur coach, and the patterns I've seen in myself and in my clients is that those downs are usually when I was personally feeling unfulfilled. Sometimes it was because a launch that flopped, and sometimes it was just life and had nothing to do with business. But those ups, oh boy, those are the times when I was feeling my most authentic and completely aligned to my purpose, or when I just felt like I was rocking that work-life balance. I would be thinking I could do this all day long and never feel tired. One of my loves is sharing what works for me and what has been working for my clients to achieve this very feeling, full of passion, happiness, peace, and freedom. So I decided to create a private podcast for coaches. Maybe you just want to develop better communication skills that boosts engagement, leads to better results, and makes you feel like you're actually making a difference in the lives of the people you serve. Then you're invited too. We talk about this and more in the UBU private podcast for coaches. Whether you're a mentor, a parent, or run a client-focused business, coaching skills benefit everyone and anyone who wants to communicate in a way that builds relationships. Fall in love with your life and business again. Click the link in the show notes for your invitation to join us right now. Then come back and enjoy this episode. Hey, difference maker, have you ever wanted to write a book? I am so happy to have Marta Spirk back on the show. And if you need a reminder of her backstory as a mom of triplets, go check out her episode in season 1. I think it's episode 14. So, of course, we get into some parenting with the Enneagram topics that you don't want to miss. But now that we are both fellow authors, she asked me some surprising questions about the writing process that I wasn't quite ready to share about, but it actually turned out to be a mutually beneficial conversation when it comes to trusting yourself and trusting your journey. Creatives are going to love this episode. Let's get started. It's time to stop comparing yourself to others and plug into what is uniquely you. Welcome to Unbox Your Personality, the podcast for coaches, parents, and mentors like you who understand that your happiness makes you more effective at what you do, bringing out the best in others. I'm Jen P. Higgins, personality strategist and Enneagram fluff remover. Get laser focused on who you are and who you aren't, so you're free to make the impact you were born to make. And have fun doing it. Your personality is your business. So, let's get down to business. Today, I am here with Marta Spirk, marketing queen. How are you doing?
I am great. I'm so excited to chat again.
I know we always have fun chats. Before we get started, can you tell the listeners a little bit about your podcast?
Yes. Thank you so much for asking. So the name of my show is The Empowered Woman, and it's all about visibility, personal growth, and profit for women entrepreneurs. And of course, one of my favorite tools is the Enneagram. That's one of the main ways we connected was because of that. And so I use personality assessment, self-discovery, a lot of that to help women understand themselves and grow their business. And that's really my focus. And I'm so excited to be here and dive into it even more.
Yes. So you were one of the first people on my book launch team because you love the Enneagram so much. And I am just dying to ask this question, what your first reaction was to the book.
Yeah, my first reaction really was, I had so many reactions, but I think I was just happy. I was happy that somebody put something together like that for the Enneagram world. I was grateful, I guess I should say, because that helps me with my work since I use the Enneagram as a tool. And then I can refer people to that. I can point people towards the details because I get into some of the details, but I don't get so much in depth with the science and everything that you put in there. And one of the things that came to mind is that I usually tell people, don't just start with the test and take the test, right? It's a journey and you're going to be researching and discovering it. And it's usually that. I mean, it's your own responsibility. Essentially, I put the ball in people's court and it's like, now I can put people in your court and be like, here's where you need to go, because it's so in depth, but not in a dense way, in an easy to digest way that takes away lots of the second guessing and the questions that I can't even answer myself, but that they can use it as a guide and a parameter. So I guess in short, I was grateful. Thank you for putting this book out there, Jen.
Well, you're welcome. And it's funny that you say that now, having a resource for your clients. That's kind of how the book came about. So last year, I created the UBU coach certification program, and the resources that I was using, that I was recommending for my students, they were like, I like it, but it's not you. I would like to see something in your language. You should just write a book. And so I've always wanted to write a book, but that extra push of being able to have a resource that was not overwhelming, that did use the language that I used in my lessons, was really the drive to actually do it. I'm like, okay, there is definitely a need for this. I saw the need already, but now other people are telling me that this is a need. And I'm like, well, I'm here to deliver.
And that's interesting, because that was one of the things that I was curious about, because we were talking about this before, how I just released my book as well. And one of the main things that I talk about is the Enneagram, of course, high level, because it's a lot personal growth focused and all of that, and sprinkling in my journey. So it got me thinking, for you, what that would look like, because I think that's interesting for people to know as well.
So it would be like what my journey was?
Yeah, from, writing it, how putting it all together, because you have so many stories in there. And I feel like it would be interesting to know what the process was like to connect the stories with those specific points to convey that, because I feel like that's really interesting. And that's what people struggle with when they're creating content. I don't know, my marketing brain.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good.
But I was curious as to how this came to be. So I'm glad that you went there, because I was curious.
Yeah, so that's how it actually started. And I don't know if you're familiar with StoryBrand, Donald Miller, StoryBrand. He was a huge influence on my writing style and my marketing style. And Lisa Cron, have you heard of her? She wrote the book Wired for Story. So her source is in the source section of my book. If you want more information on that book, she is actually writing for fiction. So she's writing to fiction authors about how to write a story. And she uses a lot of brain science. She wasn't my only resource, but when it came to me actually writing the book, I used a lot of her suggestions and her tactics in weaving in my stories to make my point.
Okay.
So it's kind of a mashup between this book for fiction authors and this program for marketers and business owners on how to market their business, but I used it in a way to market my thoughts and my ideas through this book. So it was a lot of fun, I have to say.
Yeah, no, I can tell just by reading it that, the humor sprinkled in and everything. I really loved how it was. And thank you for sharing that resource. I think it's a perfect blend, because and I can see with the stories. That was one of the things that impressed me a lot, is how seamless it really, the stories and the science, like it's not abrupt, like here's a story and here's something else. Everything just goes so well together.
Because I do feel like I've always loved writing, but I never felt like I was quote unquote good at it. I mean, that's probably not fair to say. I would read what I wrote and I would be bored. And I'm like, okay, if I'm bored with my own reading, that's not a good sign. And, I do have some neurodivergence that cause me to get bored easily. And then on top of that, the type 7, I was like, okay, I can't be bored reading my own book. It needs to entertain me as well. So I was my own worst critic, I think, for many, many years, until I learned a new skill on how to tell a story. I've always been a storyteller, but it's always kind of been in pieces, not necessarily coherent. And so I think that was a lot of the fun part, is being able to hone a skill and then deliver it.
Right. No, that's amazing. And that's great advice. I'm going to have to check this book out because it sounds like that's the missing piece. Maybe for my second book, I can use that and infuse more stories. What I really loved was, and coming from the perspective of somebody that was just working on my own thing as well, is the structure of the parts and the chapters and how you build upon it, like aware but overwhelmed. Like it was a constant thing. And that was so helpful to see how everything was flowing together from a standpoint, organizational standpoint. I was like, wow, this is really clever. Way to go. And also from just a reader wanting to understand more of the Enneagram, I felt like that was really, really helpful because it was broken down. And I'm a total fan of things being broken down marketing wise, right? So that people don't get lost and it's not way over their heads and they're like, all right, I have to stop. And that was something that I felt that was not the case at all. Like it was just, let me keep going because there's more to this. It was just enough to hold me over until the next point, just in general terms of the reading. I feel like something that I understood more in depth, even though it wasn't 100% new, because you presented to my group, to my membership, and and we got to see a little bit of your course on the color spectrum. And that analogy is just so genius because it's just so easy to understand the concept of it's a fluid thing. And there's so many different things. It's not just one thing. It's not just the boxes and how you explain everything so well. I feel like, seeing it in writing as opposed to when I heard you speak and when I watched the videos, it's just a different way to consume the content. And I feel like, again, super grateful to have that all in one piece to be able to digest it and refer back to if you forget. Like it's an ongoing thing. It's not just as the Enneagram as a whole, it never ends. You can continue to learn and unpeel layers and, understand it more in depth. I feel like that's your book. Many reads, many viewings of the same movie, but then you pick up on different things at different times. I felt like that's what it was for me. I'm going to have to go back and I can't wait to get the physical copy. That's, oh my gosh, that's going to be huge because then to, make notes and use that in my coaching and with my clients and all of that. So that was my takeaway.
Are you feeling a bit disappointed that you haven't finished that project yet? Are the kids' schedules impacting your business? Or are the demands of your business affecting your relationships at home? Maybe you need a magic formula for that work-life balance before your fire gets so dim or it completely burns out. I've been there. There was a point in my life where I was juggling 2 businesses and homeschooling and had personal health issues. There was barely time to even connect with myself, much less connect with my husband. When I was finally officially diagnosed with ADHD, I felt like that explained everything. I had a new perspective and started approaching things in a new way. So I created a guide containing 20 tips that I personally use, and they have worked for me for helping me stay on course with my goals. Now, you might not have ADHD, but I bet you can relate to having a million distractions during the day. So if you're ready to stop procrastinating or stop being hard on yourself for missing yet another deadline, self-imposed or not, go ahead and download the guide at powercoachjen.com. If you just find one tip from the list that helps you move forward today, you will be so glad you took the time to read it. Go to powercoachjen.com and download the guide right now. And at the time of this recording, it should be out by then.
Yay! Awesome.
Not at the time of the recording, but at the time that this airs, it should be out by then. So I love that you brought up the colors because something that had to get edited out of the book, not because I didn't like it, but it didn't stay focused to the main theme. And it could really overwhelm people, especially if you're not really into color theory.
Yeah.
But what I have discovered with the color analogies, the way humans behave and the way colors behave, that connection is so mind-blowing. And at first, I just chose the colors at random, not the red, green, and blue. My mentor, the program that I went through, I did adopt those. She called them pearls. And so I did adopt that terminology from her. And then I took it one step further into the stances and adopted the CMY color model, the pigment model for like inkjet printers and all that kind of stuff to describe the stances. When you put those on, if you superimpose those colors on the spectrum the way it is on the cover of the book, this little thing right here, they completely line up. And it's just mind blowing. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity for me to just even verbalize that in a public forum.
Do it.
Because I was just really afraid that if I started going down that route, the book was going to be, 500 pages. And I really wanted this book to be a reference book. I wanted it intentionally to be small, not small, but I didn't want it to be intimidating. That was the biggest thing. Because, I have these books that are super, super thick and intimidating.
Bible style.
Yes. And I didn't want that for people. My goal was to really simplify it and not have any fluff in there so that it would, I know you use the word dense as in it's not in a dense way, but I did want to pack in the information.
No, it's rich, but it's not dense.
Rich. That's good. That's good vocabulary. I like it. But yes, the color theory, just when you superimpose those colors onto the Enneagram like that, it gives it a whole new dimension as far as the color blends. I don't know how much you know about color theory, but those nerdy creatives who are listening to this right now, I think that would really interest them. And it is something that I do teach in the course certification program as a way for almost like a tactic for the coaches to memorize the Enneagram proprities with one symbol. So it's very, very exciting. That was actually when I discovered as I was teaching the beta program, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Look how the colors just line up perfectly. So crazy.
I love that. And that's one of the things that it just fascinates me, this trust of what I've been learning. And I know that the Enneagram facilitated a lot of that, is this self-trust, like understanding yourself, going through this route, the route of personal growth allows for you to trust where you're going, even if you can't really see it. And I think I don't know if I'm going to be able to put it into words, but I felt as you were describing that, like you started going down this path and then you realized, oh my gosh, this actually makes more sense than I thought it does. Like it fits perfectly. I couldn't have planned it, strategized it. It just works. And I feel like it speaks beautifully to the work and to the byproduct of the journey with the Enneagram. That is, it may not seem like it's that great, but it's like, all right, it does resonate a little. And then the deeper you dive into it and you're like, I feel seen, like this is it. And it just keeps on going. And it's, as much as it is challenging and hard at times, because it's like, gosh darn it, this is me. It's also so beautiful. So it's a journey of being marveled at yourself. I feel like that's what it is. More and more and more, you're like, I'm freaking amazing. It doesn't start out that way. And so at some points in the journey, it goes a little bit more into the negatives of, the realizations of, wow, this is it. And I talk a lot about forgiveness in the work that I do with the Enneagram as well. Because once you see something, you can't unsee it. And then there's the temptation of, this is crap. But that's where continuing on is so important, because then you will learn to appreciate it. So just want to add that in.
Yes, I love that. And, we actually do start out amazing. We're just blind to it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah. And the Enneagram is what kind of shines the light on those blind spots to show just how amazing we are, so that we can change our mindsets and go, okay, this is how I was meant to be. So let me own that. Let me live into that. Yeah, that's beautiful. And did you know that trust is my word of the year?
Mine is self-trust. So I'm right there with you.
High fives all around.
I know. And it's a product of this work. And like, I've known all along it has been within me all along. I didn't have to look outside of myself. It's been here. And the more I've been going down this journey, the more it just points back. It points back and it points back. And it's like, oh, I knew what I was doing this entire time. It wasn't an accident. So what if I actually am intentional this time around? So that's the goal for 2022.
It's like, do it on purpose this time.
Yeah. And it'll be even more amazing.
And, that's so true. Talking about my journey of writing the book, the quote unquote first book, that's what I call it. The first book that I was going to write, or my pre-COVID book, because I came down with COVID in September, and it kind of started all of my progress and all of my intention. Like, I had all these intention to get it out by the end of September, and I just had my whole quarter planned out, and, God had other plans, I suppose. Just some humbling had to happen there. But really what it did is it gave me the opportunity to look at what I was writing and realizing how stressed. I wasn't the only one in my family who got COVID, but I was the only one who suffered from it.
Mm.
And I think it was because of the amount of stress that I was under writing the book. And I was flat on my back. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even open my eyes. My head was hurting so bad. And I wasn't eating, but I'm sure my headache was from not being able to eat because of the not being able to taste and all those kinds of things. So all I could do was lay there and think. That was all I could do. And so I just started thinking about, okay, when I recover from this, what am I going to do? How am I going to hit the ground running? What are the things that I want to write about? Such and such and such. And then I realized I'm not writing the book that I wanted to write. I was like, there are plenty. Basically, the book was more about how to type yourself because, I have that one mini course on the secrets to Enneagram typing, which is how to type yourself. And so this book was mirroring that really. And I was like, this is not the kind of information that people need. There are books upon books upon books upon books of the Enneagram alone. And how many books can you read that tell you about all of these behaviors that are boxing us in, which is the exact opposite of what I stand for. And here I am writing a book about behaviors, or at least trying to help people type themselves by looking at these behaviors without really giving them that preface of, I can tell you this, but don't get too deep in it.
Yeah.
And it really helped me realize that I needed to write a different book. And it did take a little bit longer because I did have to do the research. Like, I had it in my head, but I needed to cite those sources to really give it credibility and authority. And so I had to go back to the drawing board, really dig in and become a student myself, which is one of the things that I teach in my coach certification program, is being the student and gathering this information. And I'm telling you, Marta, the writing came so easy after that. It was no longer stressful.
That's amazing. And that's really the impression that I got, because as I was reading through it, I was almost waiting for, like, when's the list going to come that you're going to tell me each type? You know what I mean? Because that's just the way that it goes. And it was never coming. And I was like, wait, what is she doing? And that's why ultimately I realized, wait a minute, this book is focusing on helping you avoiding mistyping. Like, this is what you're doing. You're not helping people type themselves. You're essentially showing them what not to do so that they can be enabled to find what it is that it's genius. And that's why it's so unique. And I can totally commiserate with the journey because of the writing the book and how, the ups and downs, because lots of people have been asking me, how long does it take? And I think people have this general idea that it should take years. And then once I started getting into it, I heard from lots of people, you can be done in like 3 or 4 months. It's really, really relative. If you already have everything, and if you're working with people that are, have a fast turnaround. But what they don't understand, and you can only, much like motherhood or entrepreneurship, you have to go through it to understand,
right?
Is that it's your personal journey. And I feel like you described that so well, that it was going away. And it took that bump in the road of getting sick to be like, wait a minute. And I feel like that's just as important as the actual stories in the book. Like, there has to be I don't know, what do they call it? Like, after the movie's done, they do like a reunion or backstage behind the scenes. There has to be a separate book to talk about the journey of writing the book because it's so fascinating to know what goes, all the work and really all the mindset and all the thoughts that go in behind. So I'm so excited that you're sharing this.
And it's exactly true. About halfway through, I was like, going back to the story brand framework, there's always a villain, right? Blind spots was my villain. And so it was like, okay, now that I understand the plot of my book, it was just so much easier to write. And it's kind of like the core framework of getting connected to your core when you can ground yourself in that. Stand firm on your personality tripod because all of the legs, the core motivations, the core strengths, and the core values, they're all balanced and they're all sturdy. Once you're able to stand firm on that, everything becomes more effortless. Everything becomes easy, even with writing this book. That's a really cool connection.
It really is. Oh my gosh. Did we just come up with something? Or you did. I was just
new book, right?
I know. Isn't that crazy how it's like, that's something I could write about in the next one. And I think it's never going to end. That's how people get hooked and they just release a book a year.
I think so. I think you're absolutely right on that.
So fun.
Yes.
Describe it a little bit more to me because I feel like it would benefit me in understanding my children because they're in the phase with like they're turning 6 in a few days where things are really coming out to the surface and I'm trying to figure them out but it's still a little nebulous. And I think a lot of it is because I may be biased by what I know about me and my husband, and I'm trying to fit them in those little boxes already. So I don't know if that's related at all. Like, I don't know, walk me through what it is, and maybe there's a connection there and it could be beneficial to me.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the parenting part because that was something that I chatted with someone in a separate episode. It's the Jerry Potter episode, by the way. So for listeners who want to go back and listen to that one, because I was like, right before, maybe 2 days before we recorded that one, I woke up and wrote down on an index card. I keep index cards by my bed. And I just wrote down on an index card really quickly, parenting with the Enneagram or Enneagram for parents, something like that. And I said, that would be a really beneficial workshop, I think. And I just put it on the index card to table because I've already got my plate full right now. And one of the things, so my original membership was for parents. And so I have a soft space, I guess, for parents who use the Enneagram because I've used personality for so long. It really helped me understand the differences for my kids and those kinds of things. I think what my biggest message to parents is learning how to shape our children in their wholeness. Because we're blinded by pieces of us because of different experiences that we have as we grow up. So when they are young, they are so much more whole than we are as adults. We can learn so much from children, the way they question things, the way they trust things, they're in their emotions, they're in their thoughts, they're all over the place trying to crawl and trying to scoot and cruise along. So they are so much more in touch with the pieces of them than we are. And we can learn so much from them, definitely. But I think as parents, our job is more to foster that and to give them the boundaries to be able to express all those pieces of them. Right. And you can do that with the Enneagram, especially with the 9 acknowledgement languages and really understanding the wholeness of the different dialects and bringing those out in your children. Mm-hmm. And then they get to figure out what their superpower is, the more that we can basically coach them. Parents are coaches for our kids.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I'm glad that came up because it is something I'm passionate about, even though it's not a part of my business right now. I think possibly I might go back in that direction because here I am talking about it again on a second episode.
And it's huge. And I think a lot of my work and my journey has been motivated because of them. It's like, it's my responsibility to understand myself because if I do, then I can help them understand themselves and I can understand them and I can let them be who they are naturally without trying to fit them in a box, which counterintuitively I'm already kind of trying to do, but just in the sense of, if I can pinpoint that that's really where you're going, then I can adjust what I do around you. I can adjust how I talk to you because I understand that that's what you value. That's where I'm coming from. Because thinking about my childhood, like, had my parents known that that's what I was shaping up to be, maybe they would have acted differently. I don't know, not wanting to go back into the past and live in resentment, but just, I'm always correcting myself. But you know what I mean? Like, because I'm so aware now, I'm like, how can I transfer this to them so that they can be the best that they can be? Because I'm on this journey.
Yeah. I totally relate with that sentiment. And I think it's so much easier to do that with adults, because adults are already broken.
Right. I know. It's easier to fix.
Right. And for children, I think we have this opportunity for them to never even get to that spot.
Right.
To never even be broken. Right. And really teaching them the skills of how to express their emotions, of how to move their body and how to think through things, and know whether to move their body or to not move their body.
That's self-trust, right?
Yeah.
Hey, it's just knowing. And that, to me, I feel like everything came so beautifully together by stumbling upon the Enneagram and going on this journey, was because of the pressure that I felt with having triplets, of how in the freaking world am I going to help them be who they are when it's all happening at the same time. I just was faced with this impossible situation of, I'm just here struggling to figure out myself. How in the world am I going to help these kids? And then that was the answer. It's help yourself. Help yourself, please. And then the answers will come.
It's so true. It really is, because number one, they need to know that we're vulnerable. They need to know that we're, fallible. And that's going to really speak to their self-esteem. And I can really relate to, not in the same way of having triplets, but having neurodivergent children that are almost the opposite, but developmentally on the same plane. So they're 2 years apart, but my older was 2 years developmentally behind. So when I homeschooled them, it was kind of easy because I homeschooled them both on the same level and I didn't have to juggle that. So that part was really nice, but they were so different. So parenting them was different. And I had the best case manager when Eric was 4. I call her my little angel in disguise. And she gave me the best advice that I try to take every opportunity I can to tell parents who are, in this kind of same situation, like, am I going to screw up my kids? Please don't let me screw up my kids. She basically told me to treat Eric as an adult, but expect him to act like a child. And the reason being is with autism, that we're basically programming their brain, and with autism, they have a harder time unlearning things. So if I teach him childish ways or be okay or permissive or those kinds of things, he will have a harder time later outgrowing those. And negative behaviors can come from that when we stay in our childish mind, or immature mind, I should say, our immature mind. And so that was the best piece of advice. Right? Teach him to be an adult, but expect him to act like a child. He's 18 now and he still lives in my basement, but he's so completely independent. I came home one day and his car was gone. So number one, he drives. He doesn't drive far, but he drives. And I can tell him to, zip out down to the grocery store that's half a mile away. And he will. That's amazing to me. There are not a lot of moms of autistic kids who can brag of that. And so the second piece of advice that she gave me is when I asked, well, that's what I do for Eric. What do I do for Ryan? Because he doesn't have autism. He's different. And me not wanting to put people in boxes and, that kind of stuff. And she said, you do the same. You don't do anything different. And so it made me realize that sometimes we put people in boxes. Let's see, how do I want to say this? Like, the boxes that we put people in sort of drive our expectations of how they are going to affect us. But the way we affect other people really is a general one size fits all. And it's love. Like you just love them. I want them to be happy, healthy adults. That's my goal. And I have a vision and I am going to love them through that goal because I care so much. And so when we start putting people in boxes, we limit our ability to do that. We limit our ability to love, but we also limit our ability to reach that goal, that vision that we have.
Yeah. Well, and this makes me think of, because I've done one of my sons that has a lung condition. We went through speech therapy. And so it was early intervention. He didn't move on to do IEP, but I did have several, different people that have supported us and then doing behavioral therapy with one of my other sons and things like that. And I remember on several instances, there were even statistics, and I'm not going to remember now, like the percentage of what parents actually get right compared to what they get wrong. But at the end of the day, I think simplifying it is the fact that you're even worrying already shows that you're doing amazing, right? And and then we want the specifics, and it's like, no, but give me the steps. No, but tell me exactly what to do, which is what you were just saying. What do I do with the other one? Then thanks, I got it. It's good with this one. What do I do? And it's like, you just love on them. And then bringing it back to, you just be who you are. And that is because that's what they need, right?
Yes. That self-love that you teach, right? Because we can't give from an empty cup. So if we don't love ourselves, how can we serve other people with love if we don't have it ourselves? And so, yeah, it all just comes full circle. It's amazing.
Yes. Oh, I love it. So good.
Yes. We'll see where we are on time. I don't want it to end. I want to talk about more stuff, but I can't think of it. We're so efficient.
I do have.
You have a call?
30. Yeah. I just need to touch base because we're going to do a live.
It's classic type 3 to be so efficient also, by the way. It just comes naturally. That's why it's your superpower.
I guess I need to give myself more credit. That's something that I'm still learning.
So of the 9 acknowledgement languages, which one kind of blew your mind a little bit? Or did they all blow your mind?
Well, yeah, I would say that because I don't remember all the ones in particular. If you want to walk me through them or remind me
And honestly, sometimes I have to remind myself what I call them now, because when I taught this last year, I actually used different vocabulary or different titles of the languages. But after doing the research, the brain science research, and seeing how, here's another aha for me in the writing process, seeing how the 9 acknowledgement languages really matched up with how our brains function was super mind-blowing for me. And so I changed the names. But the first one is the experience gate and how we experience our world. And then the attention filter and the emotional yardstick. That one's probably my favorite, to be honest. The control tactic, the control tactic actually is the language that helps my clients switch their mindset and really just, it's almost like it's such a blind spot. I don't actually call it a blind spot in the book, but it really is a blind spot because they don't really see how they are resisting or how they are sorting or how they're trying to impress other people or, impress emotions onto other people. And so it's really a blind spot, but it's kind of our default mode of how we manage this information that's coming in.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I'll just stop you there and say that the emotional one is the one that speaks to me the most. And the reason that being, I saw the other day somebody posted, what do you prefer, Enneagram or human design? And I think like 2 years ago, I would have said Enneagram, hands down, because I didn't really know about human design. But last year, I really dove into human design and I see how everything complements. I'd always said that. Every personal assessment tool, every personal discovery thing that you find out there, they all complement each other because it's different ways. They're not conflicting. It's just different ways of seeing things if you choose to use it that way, right? And many times, like when we're talking about the Enneagram and the Christian debacle, we've had conversations about this as well. Any tool can be used for good or for bad. It's your decision. Go with it. And one of the things that I realized by diving into human design is how I rely a lot on how I feel. And I didn't know that. I rely a lot on how I feel. And that was something that was a little bit tricky for me, thinking about how Enneagram 3s tend to suppress feelings because they're just looking outside of themselves constantly. And this process of coming home to me has been seeing that I do have them. They are there. I was just in denial of them, but they're still guiding me. And one of the most, I think the biggest breakthroughs was understanding that the reason why, especially when you say Enneagrams are so effective and I don't see myself that way, is because I have zero attention to detail. And a lot of that comes through because I rely a lot more on how I feel than on the specificity of things and the imagery of things. And that's why a lot of my creative side comes from there. I did not see myself as a creative until recently when I started surrounding myself with so many creatives. I was like, I've been singing and playing the piano for years. I am a creative. I just hadn't assigned that label to myself until people kept telling me, no, you are. And so I feel like that was super helpful because even understanding the Enneagram, I feel like I was still creating those labels of, well, if the 3 is like this and I'm a 3, then I must tick all these boxes. And it's like, no. So I don't know if that helps.
All of these behavior boxes, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because the 9 acknowledgement languages, even though they're quote unquote behaviors, they're like a special kind of behavior, really. They're behaviors that are so closely attached to a motivation that you can't really separate them.
Right.
And for the type 3s, understanding, that extra layer of there are types that are aware, there are types that are unaware, and there are types that are unaccepting. And type 3s is in that triad of the unaware, along with the type 9s and the type 6s. And so for type 9s, it's easier for me to make connections to type 9s because I have lots of type 9 stories because my husband's a type 9. But type 9s are really unaware of their anger. That if we're talking about the emotional yardstick, they're really not aware that how they measure what they pay attention to is by how bothered they are by it. But if you've ever met a 9, they're the most chill people in the world. Right. They're super friendly. They're very go with the flow. Like, whatever. You would never peg a type 9 as being angry unless they're unhealthy, of course.
Yeah,
but
that's so fast.
It's the same thing with what was that?
So many layers. There's just like so much. It's amazing.
Right. And then, so for a type 3 being unaware, it's kind of similar. Type 3s, they pay attention to things based on how it makes them feel about themselves because it's about identity and about significance, but they're not aware of it because they're emotionally blind, right? That's a blind spot. As a 7, I'm emotionally blind too. It's like, do we really have to, for me, it's negative emotions. And then for a 3, it's really any kind of emotions that's going to slow you down. And that could be happy emotions. Happy emotions can slow a type 3 down too. And so chuck those.
Handle it. Just, pretend it's not there.
And just got to keep going. And making these connections. So for a type 9, it's making these energy connections with other people to basically fuel them and avoid conflict in that kind of way. Because if I'm connected to people, then there aren't going to be any differences. If I merge with people, then they're going to like me. And for type 3s, it's more of an emotional merging. Like I'm going to match somebody else's emotions so that I am accepted in this situation.
There's clearly a difference. That's
It's subtle when you just kind of read it on paper.
Right.
But when you talk through it, it's so
different.
To me, it's like a stark difference.
Yes. No, I totally get it.
But then, when you're reading the books, the thick books, right?
Right.
It's so easy to get confused and go, okay, well, then maybe I'm a 9. I've had people
We're
that
all the same at the end of the day. I'm all of them.
Exactly. Right. It's the microcosm of the Enneagram that's within us, that we have access to all of the pieces within us. It's just for a different motivation, and it's going to look slightly different. Yeah. So this is always fun talking to you about the Enneagram and just being nerdy about it. I'm so glad that you came on today.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me. I could do this every day for hours.
But I know you're busy.
Of course.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thanks so much, Jen.
I'm so looking forward to collaborating more with this awesome lady. I hope you were inspired to step into your creative side and maybe to even write your own book. If these two busy moms can do it, you can too. I am a huge believer that when you are connected to your core, your energy is freed up to be more creative in your problem solving, in your marketing, or just in your life recreationally. And this is what my book can help you do. It is now available in paperback at a special launch price, so go grab your copy now while it's still on sale. It's called The Secret to Being You, Using Brain Science and the 9 Acknowledgement Languages to Unbox Your Enneagram. Visit go.unboxenneagram.com/book to order the book right now. The sooner you get the copy, the sooner you can start unboxing yourself. And then unleash your power. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and reviewing the Unbox Your Personality podcast. To learn more about yourself, go to powercoachjen.com. Find out how you are different so you can make your difference.